I never believed one perfect day could shatter into a nightmare. But looking back, I should have known, happiness like that never lasts. The sun was bright that morning, the kind of golden glow that makes the world feel invincible. My girlfriend, Emily, was laughing beside me as we walked through the crowded park, her hair catching the light, her voice drowning out the noise of the city. We had no plans, no deadlines, no worries. Just the two of us. For once, the world didn't feel heavy. We spent hours like that, chasing the small joys that only couples understand. Sharing ice cream even though she stole most of mine. Getting lost in the chaos of the street fair. Pretending to argue over which ride at the carnival was scarier. Every moment was simple but perfect, and I remember thinking, this is the kind of day I'll never forget. I was right, but not for the reasons I hoped. As the sun began to dip, we wandered away from the noise, heading toward the quieter streets. Emily leaned against my shoulder, humming some tune she had stuck in her head, and I thought about how rare it was to feel this kind of peace. For years my life had been chaos. But with her, everything was different. We stopped at a small bridge overlooking the river. She turned to me, eyes glowing, and said softly, "Promise me, no matter what happens, you'll never let go of me." I laughed, not knowing why her voice sounded so serious. Why would I ever let go? She smiled, but there was something in her gaze, like she knew a storm was waiting just beyond the horizon. It started small. Footsteps. Too many of them. Shadows stretching across the street behind us. I turned. At first it looked like just a group of men walking together. Dressed in black, their faces hidden by masks. But there was something wrong about the way they moved, too deliberate, too synchronized. Emily gripped my arm. "Do you see that?" she whispered. Before I could answer, the men sped up. Their steps echoed, bouncing off the walls of the narrow street. My heart hammered. Instinct screamed at me to run. We did. The sound of our shoes against the pavement was loud, frantic. We weaved through alleys, past shuttered shops, down empty streets. But no matter where we turned, the shadows followed. Dozens of them. A swarm in black. "Why are they after us?" Emily gasped, her voice breaking with fear. "I don't know, just keep running." But we couldn't outrun them. They were too many. The chase ended in a dead-end alley. The walls rose high on all sides, trapping us like prey. I spun around, fists clenched, every nerve in my body screaming to protect her. The men in black closed in, surrounding us. One of them stepped forward, taller than the rest, his mask reflecting the dim streetlight. His voice was calm, almost casual. "Empty your pockets. Everything. Now." I threw down my wallet, my phone, everything I had. Emily, with shaking hands, did the same. I thought that would be enough. That they'd take what they wanted and leave. But then one of them grabbed Emily. "No, don't touch her," I shouted, lunging forward. A fist slammed into my stomach, knocking the air out of me. Another strike cracked across my jaw. I collapsed to the ground, struggling to breathe. Emily screamed. I forced myself up, vision spinning, and saw them shoving her against the wall. She fought, kicked, scratched, but they were too strong. One of them raised a metal pipe. "No. Stop." My voice broke. "Take me instead." The pipe came down. Her scream cut through me, raw and sharp. I tried to crawl toward her, but hands grabbed me, holding me down. Blow after blow rained down on her. I heard the sound, bones breaking, breath shattering. And then, silence. Her body crumpled to the ground. The world froze. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My mind screamed that this wasn't real, that it couldn't be happening. But the blood staining the pavement said otherwise. The leader of the group knelt down beside me. He tilted his head, studying me through the mask. "Remember this?" he said softly, almost like a whisper in my ear. And then they were gone. Just like that. A swarm dispersing back into the shadows, leaving me broken in the alley. I crawled to Emily's side, my hands shaking as I touched her face. Her eyes were half open, lifeless. The girl who had been my light, my anchor, my everything, gone in seconds. I screamed until my throat tore. I held her until the world blurred. And in that moment, something inside me shattered. Grief turned into fire. Tears turned into steel. That night, on the cold ground of that alley, I made a vow. I would find every single one of them. I would hunt them down, no matter how long it took, no matter the cost. And when I did, they wouldn't just pay. They would beg for mercy they would never receive. This wasn't just about justice. This was revenge. And I would stop at nothing until Emily's blood was avenged. The first nights after Emily's death were a fog of police reports and empty coffee cups. People came and went with solemn faces and rehearsed condolences, but all their words were hollow. The city moved on like a tide erasing footprints. I couldn't. I would not. The alley smelled like iron and fear in my memory, and that smell became the map I followed. I didn't have evidence. I had fragments, a flash of a mask, the scrape of a boot, a voice clipped like a blade. But fragments can be stitched. Fragments can become a rope that pulls you to the truth. I started with the most obvious thing, the people who never seem to look up. The cameras. The shop footage. The bus stop recordings. For days I sat in front of a screen, pausing, rewinding, watching the swarm of black move like a single animal through town. One of the men had a limp. One had a tattoo peeking from under a cuff. Small details. Small keys. I learned to read people like a book. Where they worked, where they drank, who they trusted. I followed them from a distance, always in the shadow. I learned that they weren't random thugs. They were organized like a hyena pack. One called himself Anton, broad shoulders, a scar down his cheek. He laughed the loudest the night of the attack. Another, only known by the slur of his speech, ran a small repair shop on the edge of town. The leader, the masked one, was careful. Too careful. He never stayed in one place long. But he had patterns. Even the careful leave traces. I needed allies. Revenge is a lonely thing and I refused to waste it on mistakes. I reached out to people I wouldn't have met before. A private investigator whose office smelled of stale tea and determination. A young coder who wore the internet like a second skin. An old friend from a boxing gym who owed me a favor. I paid in cash, in promises, in the kind of silence only the hurting understand. We started small. The investigator pulled footage from a route camera that had caught a blur on the night I was attacked. The coder ran noise through filters, matched gait patterns and pulled a still, a glimpse of a man's jawline, a watch. The gym friend put me on a schedule. Run, lift, stance. He taught me how to make my hands last, how to breathe through pain. He didn't teach me to be a killer. He taught me to be a better target. Days turned into weeks. My apartment became a shrine of focus. Maps tacked to the wall, receipts, names, times, faces. I learned their shifts and their weaknesses. Some of them were braggarts who posted too much. Others were careful and arrogant in their own way, certain that a frightened city would never pry them loose. The first big break came from a stupid mistake. One of them, a kid who had been there for the stealing, not the beating, uploaded a clip to a private messenger group. He thought it was private because the group was small, and because people like them act like their sins are invisible. He filmed a laugh, a swagger, a shadow of their leader's voice. It was enough for the coder. Enough to get a name. Enough to open a door. When you're hunting, a name is currency. It buys access. I learned where this kid lived and his whole life was small and loud and clumsy. He was sloppy with his loyalty. He answered to a phone call at odd hours and he wore a chain that I had seen glint against Emily's purse. A chain the thieves had stolen that night. I started following him more closely. Getting close wasn't the same as acting. I watched him buy cigarettes, watched him laugh at a joke he didn't understand. At night I planted a camera across from his building and watched the feed until my eyes burned bright. After 3 nights he left his door unlocked. A minor miracle of arrogance. I slipped in, took his phone, copied the messages, the images, the names whispered in the dark. I left a note on his table. You should stop laughing at the wrong people. He never knew. Evidence mattered, not because I sought legal recourse, the system is a slow animal, but because evidence is the language of truth. It makes the private public. It shoves the light into corners people want to keep shadowed. I compiled what I had piece by piece into a cold dossier. Faces, times, patterns, the name of the leader who spoke like ice. I didn't know his given name yet, but I had his world. Where he ate, where he laundered money, the small church his crew pretended to respect. I also trained. Nights turned into low-slung hours of grueling conditioning. My friend from the gym put me through drills that broke me and reassembled me. Punches, yes. Footwork, yes. But also patience. A good fighter knows when to strike. A better one knows how to wait. I learned to steady my breathing when my blood roared like a storm. When you plan a hunt, you must make your body reliable. Then came the first direct confrontation. Not the climax but the first test of steel. The target was Anton, the man with the scar. He was small-time compared to the leader, but he was a signer on the cruelty that night. He had been arrogant enough to keep his phone in a bar where he bragged too loudly. I had a video, Anton's laugh as the men in black circled us, one clipped frame showing him pushing Emily. It was ugly and undeniable. I set the stage. Not to kill, not yet, but to scare. To remind him that the world has ears and eyes now, and that public shame is corrosive. I knew he worked late at a warehouse by the river, stacking crates until the sirens died. I waited across the street behind a curtain of iron and rain. When Anton stepped out into the wet air, he didn't expect me. He walked with that swagger of men who hurt others to feel big. I stepped out from the shadow, breathing cold, calm. He blinked, then smiled. There's always that moment a bully thinks he'll win. Anton, I said, my voice low but clear. Remember that night? His smile faltered. You again? I told you, stay away. I pulled a small device from my pocket and flicked it on. His own video looped, projected across the brick wall behind him. The footage showed him as he had been, part of the swarm. The bar went quiet across the street. Heads turned. Phones came out. The world pressed in. Panic is a particular sound, and when it comes with recognition, it's sharp. Anton's hands went to his pockets. He reached for his phone. I stepped closer. Watch, I said. Everyone will watch. Your wife will watch. Your boss will watch. The guy who gives you favors will watch. He lunged then, a desperate, ugly movement. He swung first and clumsy. My training saved me. A block, a shove, a quick twist. I didn't break his arm. I didn't need to. But I put him on the pavement, cold rain stinging his face. I loomed over him, calm. I wanted him awake, aware, terrified. You think you can just vanish into the night after what you did? I asked. People remember when they are shown the truth. People punish in ways courts don't. He tried to scramble away, catching his breath. Please, he begged, voice raw. Please, I didn't mean. Meaning doesn't matter when you chose to stand and laugh on the night someone else bled. His words were thin shields. I left him there, soaked and shivering, as his little world opened and closed like a wound. The video on the wall had been shared with the bar, with acquaintances, with the few people who couldn't stand his bragging. Within hours, his phone blew up. Within a day, the warehouse received a call. Within a week, his name stopped opening doors. It was a small strike. Not the head, but a niggling wound beneath the skin. It was enough to show me that the plan worked. Expose their faces, show the truth, watch the structures that sheltered them collapse. It felt clinical rather than cathartic, like cleaning a wound instead of ripping it open. But it was progress. It was proof that the world, sometimes, answers. And it stoked a fire that would not be doused. When I went home that night, I sat in the dark and let the adrenaline die down. I thought of Emily's laugh on the bridge. I thought of her words, never let go, and I tightened the promise, knotting it deeper. The hunt had begun. The pack had felt the first nudge. There were bigger ribs to break ahead. The leader, the cold voice, the mask remained a shadow. But shadows cast outlines, and I had enough to trace him now. I would follow the line until it reached him. I would show every face. And when the city could not pretend ignorance anymore, they would pay. This was no longer just rage. It was strategy. It was work. And I, for the first time since that alley, felt like a man who could finish what fate. The city was burning with secrets. By the time I reached the final stage of my plan, the faceless predators who once laughed as they cornered us in the alley were no longer shadows. They had names, faces, lives I had studied down to the smallest detail. One by one, they had already begun to feel the pressure. Anton, humiliated in front of his colleagues and family. Victor, exposed in a digital storm of leaked conversations and bribes. Roman, rattled by the anonymous packages I had left at his door, each one containing photos of him taken from angles that proved he was never safe. But none of them were the true leader. The man I was after, the one who had ordered the beating, the one who had lifted the blade that cut through that night, was called Sergei. He wasn't just another thug. He was a businessman in the daylight, a gangster in the shadows. And he thought his power made him untouchable. He was wrong. I spent weeks building the stage for Sergei's downfall. Every wire I placed, every hidden lens I screwed into place, every escape route I blocked, it all led to a single room. A warehouse abandoned for decades, rotting with rust and dust. But I transformed it into something else, a mirror of the alley where it had all begun. The same narrow walls. The same suffocating space. The same hopeless trap. Only this time I was the one in control. I left him breadcrumbs, fake deals, anonymous messages, whispers in his own organization. Slowly I pulled him toward the place I wanted him. By the night of the final act, Sergei thought he was coming to meet a powerful client. Instead, he walked straight into my web. The door locked behind him with a heavy metallic slam. He turned sharply, barking into the shadows, "Who's there?" I stepped out of the darkness, my voice steady, every ounce of fear burned away by the fire that had been fueling me since that night. "You don't remember me? That's fine. I've remembered you every single day." Sergei laughed, A low growl echoing in the chamber. You think you can scare me, boy? Do you know how many people I've crushed? How many came here thinking revenge made them strong? I pressed a button. The walls hissed and shifted, closing in by inches. The sound of gears grinding filled the space like the ticking of a clock. I don't want to scare you, I said. I want you to feel everything you made us feel. The panic, the pain, the hopelessness. And I want you to know it's me who's giving it back to you. For the first time his smirk faltered. I triggered the lights, flooding the room with projections, videos of his men crumbling, their reputations destroyed, their secrets dragged into daylight. Each wall was a screen replaying the unraveling of his empire. You built your life on fear, I whispered. Now it's your turn to drown in it. The floor shifted. Water began pouring in, slow at first, then rising steadily. Sergei's eyes darted, calculating, searching for exits that didn't exist. He lunged at me, swinging his fists, but I was ready. Weeks of training, every punch I had thrown into the air, every bruise I had taken came alive in that moment. I ducked, countered, drove my shoulder into his chest and sent him crashing against the wall. You'll never win, he spat, coughing. Men like me, we always rise back up. I slammed the button again. The walls crept closer. The water climbed to his knees. No, I said quietly. Not tonight. Tonight you sink. For 12 minutes Sergei fought the machine. He clawed at the walls, slammed against the locked door, shouted threats into the void. I watched, unflinching, as the man who had destroyed so many lives tasted desperation for the first time. The room was designed to give him choices. False exits, impossible puzzles, switches that only made the water rise faster. Each wrong move pulled him deeper into his own fear. Finally he stumbled, coughing, his strength fading. His voice cracked. Please, stop this. We can make a deal. Money. Power. Whatever you want. I leaned closer to the microphone. My voice carried through the speakers, cold and sharp. You already took everything I wanted. The water surged higher. Sergei thrashed, but his fight was gone. The walls closed in until there was no space left to run. His empire, his lies, his arrogance, all of it drowned with him. When it was over, I shut down the machine. The grinding gears fell quiet. The water drained away, leaving only the echo of a man who thought he was invincible. I stood alone in the warehouse, staring at the empty space where Sergei had fallen. My chest heaved, not with fear anymore but with something heavier, release. I hadn't just taken revenge. I had ended a chapter that had been poisoning me since that night in the alley. The city outside was still dark, still dangerous, but something inside me had shifted. I was no longer the broken boy they thought they had destroyed. I was the architect of their downfall. And now, I was free.